Do you feel stressed and uncertain about your retirement? If so, you're not alone. The traditional approach to retirement planning is outdated and the old rules no longer apply. But don't worry, I'm going to share a better approach. In this video, I'll explain why traditional retirement planning is no longer effective, and I'll also share the key steps to creating a better plan that works for you. So if you're ready to take control of your retirement, then stick around because I'm going to show you how. Hey everybody, I'm James Knoll, founder of Root Financial, and I'm here to teach you how to get the most out of life with your money. Now I'm going to walk you through a client case study, but before I do so, I want to outline what I view is wrong with traditional retirement planning. The way traditional retirement planning goes is it actually starts from a young age. You get good grades in high school so you can get into a good college. You get into a good college so you can get a good entry-level position. You get a good entry-level position so you can work hard and make your way up the ranks. You make your way up the ranks so you can buy a home, start a family, save for retirement. You do all these things so you can finally retire, and once you get there, then you can enjoy it all. But what too many people are finding is they get to this promised land, they get to retirement, what they've been planning for their whole lives, and they feel like it's a little bit empty. They feel like they've been sold a little bit of a lie, and the reality is, whether intentionally or not, in many ways they were. We've gotten the habit of putting off so much until a future date, and there's a better approach. I'm going to walk you through a client case study to show you exactly what I mean. This is Bill and Susan's sample. Now, Bill and Susan, they came to me and they've just been classic savers. They've been living the retirement dream in terms of they went to a good college, they got good grades, they studied hard, they got a good entry-level position. They did exactly what I talked about. They continue to move up in the ranks, maxing their 401k, buying a home, starting a family. They did everything by the books. Let's go through their situation to see maybe what they got wrong with this line of thinking. Well, here's Bill and here's Susan. They're both 57 years old. By the time they got to this position, we can take a look at their net worth, and you can see they've done very well. Now, obviously, this isn't going to apply to everyone. A lot of people see this net worth at this age, and this might not apply. That's okay if this situation isn't applied directly to you, but I think many of the principles will. So even if you're looking at these numbers and saying, hey, that's way off from where I am, stick around because what you'll see is the principles are relevant to anyone. But as we go through Bill and Susan's situation or their plan, you can see their different assets. Bill has his 401k of $882,000. He also has a rollover IRA, which is his previous company's 401k, with about $321,000. Susan has her 401k, $669,000, and then she has her Roth IRA with $76,000 in it. They also have joint savings and checking, a joint investment account with about $1.2 million, and then they have their home, card, and a mortgage on their home. Now I'm going to repeat what I just said a second ago, is Bill and Susan were the classic examples of American dream. Both of them came from lower middle class families. Both of them studied hard. Both of them worked hard. Both of them continued to save and invest and defer because their thought was we're just going to keep working until retirement, and that's when we're really going to enjoy the fruits of our labor. Now, along the way, they bought a home, they're raising a family, but there's a lot going on in their situation, and I wanted to explain to them perhaps a better way. But to do that or to illustrate that, let's continue looking through their situation. Their goal was to retire at age 67. I asked them why, and they said, well, that's when Social Security says we're full retirement age. That's what we're supposed to do according to the quote-unquote American dream. Work 40 years, then retire and be able to enjoy the fruits of our labor then. So bottom line though, they want to work 10 more years. They're 57 today. They want to retire at 67. And I'm going to come back to this point in a little bit because although it's well-intentioned to say, I want to put in 10 more years of work because that's when full retirement age is, my parents worked a long time, I need to do the same, there's some misguided aspects to that. But I'm going to hold on to that for just a bit. The next thing is we talked about how much they want to spend in retirement. Well, you saw they've been doing a really good job of saving. They said, we've been saving for a while. We do at least want to enjoy this a little bit. So we're going to spend $12,500 per month in retirement, which is $150,000 per year after taxes. Now, on top of that, we're projecting out healthcare expenses above and beyond these basic living expenses, but those are the expenses and the goals that they had in retirement. The next thing that we look at is their income. As I said, they worked good jobs. They had good jobs that they rose up in the ranks. Bill's now earning $220,000 per year. Susan's earning $240,000, $245,000 per year. And then in retirement, they'll both have their Social Security benefits, which will be strong, healthy benefits based on their earnings record. In fact, if we want to drill down into them, Bill's Social Security is projected to be $3,400 per month, and Susan's benefit is projected to be the same. So both strong benefits. The next thing we looked at is savings. So they're deferring a lot of their income via 401k. So they're both saving $30,000 per year. into their 401ks, you see Bill is getting a 3% match on his contributions, and Susan is also getting a 3% match on hers. So they're each saving 30 grand. Their employers are matching another 3%, and they're also saving $2,000 per month to their joint investment account. The next thing we looked at was their investments. So we know how much they have in 401ks and Roth IRAs and joint accounts, but we need to be able to project some growth rate, some rate of return on those assets going forward. That's where we came here. We said based upon your mix of US stocks, international stocks, emerging markets, so on and so forth, this wasn't necessarily our recommended mix. This is just how their portfolio was allocated. Their return, we're projecting, will be about 8%. And we're dropping this to 6.5% per year after they retire, assume that they'll be invested a bit more conservatively at that time, but this was a starting rate of return that we're going to assume. Here's the first place I wanted to go with Bill and Susan. We understand now their goals, where they are with their current assets, what their income sources are now and in the future with Social Security. We understand what rate of return we're going to project. Let's now get a projection of what their retirement might look like. Well, to start, we need to understand what will their portfolio be in retirement. Well, if their portfolio balance today is about $3.2 million, they are both saving 30 grand per year to their 401ks. So that's 60,000 total. Their match is another 14 grand combined, 6,600 by Bill's employer, 7,350 by Susan's employer. So when you add up their 401k contributions, plus the matching contributions, plus the 2,000 per month or 24,000 per year to their joint account, plus if we're assuming an 8% rate of return, their portfolio is projected to grow by over $250,000 this year. Their ending portfolio balance at the end of the year is $3.6 million. One word of advice here is this is never guaranteed, and we know that. But for the sake of projection, we need to assume some growth rate. Even if they do get 8% per year over the next 10 years, it's not going to be 8% every single year. It will never happen that way. Some years this will be a lot higher, some a lot lower. They might not even get 8% over the next 10 years, so that's okay. The point is just to have some starting point. So a projection to see what would this look like under these assumptions, but then we of course can always challenge and adjust these assumptions as we go. But here's what I showed them. I said, Bill, Susan, here's where you are today. You've already done an excellent job of saving, but look what the next 10 years are going to do. Yes, it took you 35 years or so to get to your first 3.2 million. What will the next 10 years look like though? Well, if we do this every single year for the next 10 years, by the time that you retire, you're projected to have almost $9 million in your portfolio. So those next 10 years, the compounding is really going to start to take hold where your portfolio, if it gets 8% per year on average, is growing by $500,000 per year in many of these years. So that's what you're projected to have going into retirement. And as we're looking at this, it seems like, hey, so far so good, right? That's not bad to have $9 million in my portfolio going into retirement, excluding real estate. And I also know I have other income sources like Social Security that I'll be able to rely upon too. Don't see the issue so far. So we kept going. The next thing I showed them was we projected out what will your income flows be in retirement, so Social Security for each of them starting at age 67, and how does that compare to your expenses? Well, expenses, they'd have their basic living expenses of 150 grand per year, adjusted for inflation. So by the time that they retired, the inflation adjusted equivalent of 150 grand today would be a little bit more than $200,000. On top of that, they still would have a mortgage payment for at least the first couple years of retirement, and it would be paid off early in the third year. Then we're projecting healthcare above and beyond that. Yes, they have Medicare, but they still have Medicare Part B premiums, Medicare Part D premiums, and then assumed out-of-pocket expenses above and beyond that. So as we lay out their expenses and we assume a projected tax rate, their total expenses are closer to $303,000. So I said, Bill, Susan, here's how we read this graph. You have $95,000 of income coming in, and that's going to bump up a little bit as we go, as Social Security gets some cost of living adjustments. But here's your expenses. Your expenses are over $300,000 and they're expected to rise. So the net flows, this is what your portfolio needs to be in a position to generate so that it can supplement Social Security, so that you can pay taxes, you can pay your healthcare expenses, you can pay your mortgage, and then have the equivalent of 150 grand left over per year for you to live on and do everything you want to do. The final thing that we want to do with this is we want to understand what does this represent as a withdrawal rate. I say this a lot if you've watched any of these case study videos, is to me, this number is irrelevant. Is $207,000 good? Well, it depends. I tell you, if you have $200,000 in your portfolio, this is a really bad number. It means you're going to blow through your savings in 1 year. If you have $10 million in your portfolio though, This is only a 2% withdrawal rate. So we need to compare this withdrawal to your actual portfolio balance to come up with what this represents as a withdrawal rate. So here's what that page looks like. When we actually compare the dollar amount they're taking from their portfolio to their portfolio value, their withdrawal rate starts at 2.3%, but then their mortgage gets paid off and it goes down even lower to the mid ones. It's not until required distributions kick in at age 75 that pushes their withdrawal rate even over 2.5%. So again, looking pretty good. These are very sustainable numbers. They were starting to wonder why I was concerned about their plan. Before getting into my concern about their plan, the final page I showed them was this. I said, Bill and Susan, here's where you are today with your portfolio balance. Here's what this is projected to look like by the time that you retire. So as we talked about, you have about $9 million in your portfolio. And your portfolio is just projected to continue growing, so much so that you're projected to pass about $23 million in your portfolio. By the way, that doesn't even include the value of your home. If we include the value of your home, you're closer to a $28.3 million net worth at that time. Now, here's my concern. My concern isn't with your finances. Your finances are in a very healthy position, and they didn't just happen to be that way. They got that way because of your hard work. They got that way because you began saving and investing early. They got that way because you've been extremely diligent about living within your means and prioritizing saving and prioritizing planning for the future. There's a wonderful book called Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. And in that book, Bill Perkins has a quote that I think is extremely relatable to what my actual concern was with this situation. I'm going to read you that quote. Bill says, I'm assuming your goal in life is not to maximize your income and wealth, but to maximize your lifetime fulfillment, which comes from experiences and your lasting memories of those experiences. Let's bring that back to Bill and Susan. If I go back to their plan, look at how much they're projected to have in their portfolio. What they also shared with me though, as we're going through this process, is yes, we have high paying jobs. Yes, we're saving a lot, but we're not really able to enjoy a whole lot of this. Our work is incredibly demanding. We might work 60, 70 hours a week, and sure, we have high portfolio balances, but what good is that if we can't even fully enjoy it? So in a way, they've been looking forward to retirement, but at the same time, continuing to push that age back. Never really looking to understand, could we retire earlier? Could we spend more today? Could we do more that we're not planning on? They had just been in that traditional retirement dream mentality of save, 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 defer, 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 and once we turn age 67, we'll have enough money to do whatever we want, or so the thinking goes. Well, here's what we need to understand. We all have 3 resources that we need to be very intentional about balancing. Those resources are our time, our health, and our wealth. And typically what we do is we sacrifice our time and we sacrifice our health in order to get more wealth. Well, in Bill and Susan's example, that's exactly what they were doing. They didn't have any time because it was all spent at work. Another thing that had slipped was their health. Their health had taken a hit because they were devoting so many hours to work, they couldn't do the things they enjoyed doing. They couldn't stay active. They weren't going to the gym and staying healthy like they used to do, and that had been an important part of their life. So as I took them back to this graph, I shared with them, I said, look, if we're trying to balance those 3 resources, your time, your wealth, and your health, I'm not concerned about your wealth. Look at this wealth right here. Even if inflation's higher than we think it's going to be, even if taxes are higher than we think they're going to be, you're still in a position where you have a lot of margin to be just fine. And we started to have that conversation. We said, are we sacrificing too much of our time? Are we sacrificing too much of our health just so we can get to this position to retire with more money than we're even going to be able to spend over the course of our lives? And so we talked about it. And one of the hard things is this is a difficult concept just to embrace and accept right off the bat. So Bill started to have some pushback. He said, well, isn't this fine? At 67, we'll have more than enough money to do whatever we want to do. We'll be able to make up for lost time. And again, we had a conversation about that. And to go back to the book, Die with Zero, Bill Perkins says this, which I think is a wonderful quote and really pertains to this comment that Bill and Susan had. In the book, Bill Perkins says, our culture's focus on work is like a seductive drug. It takes all of your yearning for discovery and wonder and experience, promising to give you the means, money, to get all those things. But the focus on the work and the money becomes so single-minded and automatic that you forget what you were yearning for in the first place. That's what I talked to Bill and Susan about next, is yes, on paper, that's absolutely right. You'll be able to make up for lost time right about here. You have all the money to do the things that you want to do. But the reality is this, by the time that you get here, if you're not intentional about your health, if you're not intentional about the experiences you enjoy, if you're not intentional about the activities and the things that really bring you to life, they're not going to magically show up the day you turn 67 and retire. By the time a lot of people get there, we've been beaten down by so many years of work and mortgage and family and just wonderful things, but they take a toll on us. And if we don't prioritize those things that really bring us to life, they're not going to magically show up. Now, before we go further here, I want to take a quick second to say what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that work is bad. I'm not saying you should get out of work as soon as you can. I'm not saying that work isn't part of a well-balanced life. Work is amazing. I love work. I think a lot of people love work. The problem is when we put everything we have into work, thinking that that somehow is going to deliver us to the promised land of more freedom, more money, more time, we're missing the point. What's the point of doing all that if we're missing the experiences and the time and the things that do bring us joy and purpose along the way? So there's a missing piece of most people's thinking that just says, hey, more money means more freedom. It does, but only to the extent that you're understanding what does that freedom even look like? What brings me freedom? What brings me joy? What brings me purpose? And ideally, we integrate those things along the way as opposed to pushing them off to some vague, uncertain date. So the real problem is that all too often work becomes a very socially acceptable form of distraction. And it's distracting us from asking ourselves, who are we really? What do I enjoy really? And instead of asking those real hard questions, we do what I believe is sometimes the easier work of putting in more hours, working longer days, working more years, saving more, deluding ourselves into thinking that that's somehow going to unlock freedom in the future. But if it's not unlocking freedom today, it's probably not going to do so in the future either. So back to Bill and Susan. What did I give them or what did I tell them based upon this plan that on paper looks incredible? Well, the first thing I started to ask them, I said, Bill, Susan, do you love what you do for work? Because it's one thing if you really love what you're doing for work, don't stop doing that. Make sure it's not interfering with other things that are important to you. But I probed, tell me about work. They didn't really love it. Now they were doing it out of a sense of duty of, hey, we've put in so many years and hours and studies to get to where we are. It feels weird not to continue working like this. Our incomes are at a place where it feels weird not to continue doing this. But no, James, we don't really love it. The other thing they told me was, look, we're working so much, it's 50, 60 plus hours a week that we can only take the weekends to briefly recharge, and then we go back and do it all over again. So not only do we not love what we do for work, but we don't even feel like we're able to fully live outside of work because work has become so demanding. The next thing I did is I said, tell me more about your desire to work until 67. So you're 57 today, why 67? Where does that number come from? And they said, James, well, to tell you the truth, that number just seems easy because it's when Social Security tells us we're at our full retirement age. And on top of that, as we mentioned, we both came from lower middle class families. Our families didn't have a whole lot. Both of our parents worked until age 70 because they had to. So for us, we almost feel this sense of guilt for not continuing to work like our parents did before us. And I said, okay, fair enough. And lastly, I want you to tell me about the spending. $12,500, it's certainly a healthy number. It's a lot more than the average person spends in retirement, but at the same time, you have a lot more in your portfolio than the average person does at retirement. Could you spend more? And they said, James, yeah, we'd love to be able to spend more. We can easily find things to spend money on. Maybe when we travel, we pay for our kids and our grandkids to come with us, all expenses paid. There's a lot of charities that we want to support. Spending more could simply be giving more to charity. So yes, James, absolutely, we could. We've just always felt a little bit guilty about saying that we want to spend more than this number. So that's where I said, Bill, Susan, that's wonderful feedback. Let's now go back to your plan for a second. Here's how I view things. You're in a position where because of your hard work and your savings and your investments, you're projected to have a lot of money left over by the age of 90. But here's what traditional retirement planning gets wrong, is it tells you to defer everything that you want to do until this point, only to say you have millions of dollars left over that you're never going to get to enjoy. Now that 23 million, maybe more, maybe less by the time you actually get there, but let's look at some options. The first thing you told me is you don't love your jobs today, but you used to enjoy them. And you used to enjoy them, but you got promoted into management positions. So you like the actual work that you do, but you don't like them because you've gotten promoted and you're now in positions where you're not doing the work, you're managing others who are doing the work. Then I just suggested, what if you demoted yourselves? And what if you went back to work and said, look, I want to do this role where I can do the work, but I don't want to have the responsibility of managing people. James, we could do that, but it would come with a pretty serious pay cut. And I said, that's okay, let's take a look at this. What if we went back to your plan and we said, instead of maxing 401ks, what if you did the minimum here just to get the match? Bill, what if you adjusted your contributions, and really this is closer to 6,000 each. What if you stop saving your joint account altogether? So you could accept a lower income because now you're going to be saving less of that income. So even though you would accept demotions, your actual cash flow for the things you'd want to spend money on hasn't changed at all. What would that look like in this scenario? Well, we reran the numbers, and as we saw it, yes, it means they have fewer dollars in their plan at the end of the day, but they still are projected to have almost $19 million. But I asked them, I said, Bill, Susan, if you demoted yourselves, what would that mean for lifestyle? They looked at each other and said, well, it would be amazing for lifestyle. One, we would enjoy the time that we do spend in the office each week, which is a lot. But number two, we'd have a lot more time outside of the office. We could easily leave our work at home. We can more easily go see a movie on a Tuesday night. We could go with friends to dinner on a Thursday night and not have to worry about rushing home to prepare for tomorrow's meeting. So as we started talking through this, we said, how much would your quality of life improve today if you took a little bit of a pay cut by taking a demotion that actually allows you to do more meaningful and enjoyable work to you? I took this a step further. I said, look, you're 57 today. You want to retire at 67. These next 10 years might be the best 10 years in terms of the health and the energy that you're going to have. Do you really want to keep working a job where you're not able to fully enjoy the health and the energy that you have because you're giving all of it to your employer and not really needing to when we look at your financial projections? When they thought about it that way, they felt like they're getting 10 years of their life back. They say, James, you mean to tell us we can enjoy what we do for work for the next 10 years instead of dread it? You mean to tell us we can spend more time with friends and family over that 10 years? You mean to tell us we can prioritize our relationship better over those 10 years, and it's only going to cost us a small percentage of our overall net worth by the time that we've passed? Absolutely. And all of a sudden, this started looking very attractive. And then just to show them some other options, I said, Bill, Susan, what if instead of demoting yourself, maybe we don't do that option, but what if instead of working until 67, what if we just cut that time in half? What if you don't work until 67, but it's age 62? So instead of working 10 more years, you work for 5 more years. What impact does that have? Well, pretty significant if you just look at this number. Maybe 10 million fewer dollars left at the end of the day, but you're still in an excellent position where you're projected to have a healthy portfolio balance at the end of your lifetime. But again, think of what those 5 years could do. What could that do in terms of your relationship and the time you have to enjoy each other's company? What could that do in terms of your ability to be with your growing children as they're maybe moving to different places across the country and starting families of their own? What could that look like in terms of the trips you're able to take, the activities you're able to experience, the things that you're able to do if we could get you out of work sooner? Again, not saying work is bad for everyone, but for them it was stressful, and on top of that, it wasn't fully necessary. Then the final thing I said to them was this. I said, could you spend more than $12,500 per month if you wanted to? And they said, sure, but that would probably be in the form of charitable giving or maybe even helping out our children with down payments on their homes or whatever it might need to be. So let's explore that, because as of now, you might have $23 million to give away when you pass, but that's not going to be for 40 years, 35, 40 years or so. That's a long time to wait for that money to do the good that you want it to. Let's just see what this would look like. What if you wanted to do an extra $25,000 of charitable giving each year? What would that look like? Well, if we look at this, what that means is, it's 1.3 million fewer dollars that you have at the end of the day, but if this is going to charity anyways, or part of it, that money is being put to work sooner. They also said we'd love to be able to help children. We'd love for them to stay in Dallas where we are and be able to buy a home near us if we want to keep the family close by, but they might be getting priced out. Things are getting really expensive. So I said, what if you could help each child with a down payment? We talked about $75,000 each. They have 3 children. Do that for 3 years, give $75,000. When we started running these things, it barely made a dent in their long-term projections. Granted, not everyone, in fact, most people aren't where Bill and Susan were in terms of their financials, but these principles apply. Of the old traditional thinking is save, 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 defer, 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 turn 65 or turn 70 and then enjoy it. What most people don't realize is they're probably on track to have more money than they could possibly spend over the course of their lifetimes. Instead, how can we start doing things today in terms of finding more balance with work, in terms of working fewer years before we're able to do the things we want to do, in terms of giving more or spending more? The goal of planning isn't to die with the most amount of money, it's to live a more aligned life. The traditional retirement thinking is wrong, and then it prioritizes in one single way, maximize assets by retirement, and then you can have your fun. Well, that's not a way that most people want to do it. When they realize there's a better way, and that better way can start today, that's where the transformation happens of understanding this money can be used for so much better good than just sitting in my portfolio so that by the time I'm 90 or 95, I end up passing away, and then it goes to doing something different. So what are the takeaways here? What's the new line of thinking that I encourage most people to think about? Well, number one is that this specific example isn't applicable to everyone, but what I do see is people who are frugal over their lifetimes and people who prioritize saving and investing often get in this rut where they can't bring themselves to spend. They can't bring themselves to retire earlier. They can't bring themselves to actually enjoy some of this. And what they end up with is realizing they did all this, they sacrificed so much, they kind of squashed some of the things they would have enjoyed along the way. And for what purpose? They didn't enjoy it anyways when they were retired, so how could they have a more balanced approach? The second takeaway is to be more intentional. Money's not the goal. Money's the tool. That money at the end of your lifetime isn't going to do anything for you. If you say, well, James, I'm going to give it away or I'm going to give it to kids, wonderful. Can you start doing that sooner? Can you start doing that when there's more of a need, both with charity and maybe even with your children? How can you use that money in a more aligned way today as opposed to just using it and deferring it forever? Because having a bigger portfolio when you're dead is not the actual goal. Use that money as a tool to help you uncover and help you accomplish the things that are actually important to you. The third takeaway is to view life more holistically. Don't view it as pre-retirement and post-retirement. And pre-retirement means save, 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 save. Post-retirement means now I get to enjoy it. Have your enjoyment today. Yes, plan for the future, because you can absolutely be too imbalanced the other direction as well, but view life more holistically. Where can I spend more today? Would spending more today impact my future goals? If not, then how can we reimagine the way that we work, the way that we spend, the way that we save, and view life more holistically as opposed to just pre-retirement and post-retirement? And then the fourth takeaway, the final takeaway, and I'll be honest, this is probably the more difficult one, is this is where the real work begins. Once I showed Bill and Susan, you could stop working sooner. You could spend more today. You could be financially independent before you thought you could. That's where the real work began. They didn't realize this, but over their years of work and sacrifice and giving so much of what they had to their companies, they almost forgot who they were. Yes, we are each other's spouses first and foremost, and then we're parents after that. But who are you above and beyond that? Who do you want to be? What things are important to you? What makes you come fully alive? Those are difficult questions that most people don't take the time to answer because they just think that magically those things will appear to them if they save enough money by the time that they retire. So this is the new way. No longer do you sacrifice your health and your time and your zeal just in pursuit of a larger portfolio balance at some time in the future. Now it's about understanding that money is a tool and that the options available to you, if you plan right and plan effectively, become unlimited. So how can you take that perspective with your planning to make sure that you're using your money as a tool to live an aligned life as opposed to looking at your money as the goal in and of itself? So as you're watching this and saying, well, this is great, but how do I know when I'm in Bill and Susan's position? How do I know when I have enough? Well, I'm going to put a video on the next screen here that talks about just that. It will help you understand when do I know that I have enough so I can start doing some of these things and living more intentionally as opposed to just continuing to save and invest forever. Once again, I'm James Knoll, founder of Root Financial, and if you're interested in seeing how we help our clients at Root Financial get the most out of life with their money, be sure to visit us at www.rootfinancialpartners.com.